I think we'll start, everyone. If people pop in, we'll let them in as we go through, but I just want to make sure we don't overrun. So hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great that you were able to give up the time, so really appreciated. I'm Hannah from Armadillo Managed Services, and I'm joined by Dan as well today. For those of you that aren't familiar with Armadillo, we are a cybersecurity specialist with over 20 years experience. We are more than just a reseller, so we do the whole journey with you, with the customer focus first, from consultancy through to sale, through to professional services, all wrapped around in a lovely managed service bow with it. So really keeping it all under that single pane of glass, customer centric is our focus here. So I'll let Dan introduce himself as well.
Hi everyone, yeah, so I'm Daniel, I'm CTO here at Armadillo. I feel like I've been in the game a long time. I've sat on the partner side, the customer side, the vendor side as well, for names such as Microsoft, Tanium, and various other customers.
Armadillo.
Yeah, and now Armadillo, absolutely.
Amazing, thank you. So we're kicking off today with our first webinar. We're going to do a whole mini series. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to drop them in the box. I'll watch them as they come through, and hopefully we can answer those for you. And if we don't get to them, I'll absolutely follow up with you later. We are recording, just to make you aware. So, hopefully you find it useful. You can pass it on to your team, your colleagues, or you can just rewatch it for some more information. So today's topic, you can't manage what you can't see. Is it worth, Dan, could you maybe just give us a little idea of what we mean by when we say this?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand it's a bit of a cliche. You hear it, you can't manage what you can't see, you can't protect what you can't see. But it's still a relevant topic. And what we're really talking about is sort of the root of where a lot of problems in environments start from. And so if you were to go to your procurement team and say, how many laptops have you purchased? They'll give you a very specific number. But that number does not match the devices plugged into your network at that moment in time, which for various reasons of software, hardware, network, and so forth, the ultimate result is that you have devices without doubt on your network, which you just don't know they exist. So they pose a security risk, or they just pose a compliance problem for you as well. And so when we talk about endpoint management, which is a very crowded market, what we're focusing on here is that part of the network that isn't being managed. And therefore, that what you can't see piece is in terms of visibility.
Okay. So that's what we want to focus on here. So normally when we did a webinar, we would talk about a specific vendor, product, but we want to focus very much on the problem here today of addressing this.
Yeah, it's the problem and the outcome. We are going to talk about a specific vendor in a moment, but really this problem is not specific to any one sector, business, industry, country. This is a problem I've seen. It's always existed. There's many attempts that have been made to solve it, but the problem can be solved, and that's what we want to focus on today.
Amazing. Okay, well, let's jump in. So we're making a very bold statement here. So why does security hygiene begin with knowing what's connected to your network?
Absolutely. So it comes down to inventory or your catalog. So you do know about the parts that you can see. Now, if you were to look in your endpoint management tool, let's say SCCM, you might see, for simplistic terms, 5,000 devices reporting in. And so through the eyes of an SCCM admin, that's how many machines need patching. But if you look at your AV tool, because it has its own mini CMDB, it might say 4,500. So instantly, we've got a 10% discrepancy. And if you talk about procurement, they might disagree. And if you look at your CMDB tool, it might say 7,500. And so you end up not knowing, or you can't answer what is such a simple question: how many devices do I have? So why is that important? Well, the devices that you can see, you can go in and say, yes, they are being patched, the firewall is enabled, the AV is up to date, EDR is running. But it's what you can't see. And of that, typically it equates to 10-15% of a business.
Wow. Okay.
And that's quite a big target, because all it needs is one of those to be compromised, or one of them to be carrying something malicious, and it's got instant access across your entire network. And that's a bit, because you can't see it, you've got no visibility, you just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's explore a little bit more about why does this matter? So what is the relevance of knowing how many endpoints are there?
Okay, so it's not so much about knowing the actual number of endpoints I've got. You know, that is absolutely an asset management question. How many devices do I have? There's finance element in there, there's procurement and so forth. What we want to focus on, or what we're talking about here, is how big is the problem? How many devices do I need to run vulnerability scans on? How many devices do I need to patch? You have your cyclical Microsoft patching. Typically, it's every patch Tuesday to every patch Tuesday. Well, then there's your target. How many devices do I need to patch? Okay, and then if there's an out of band patch, there's an emergency patch which has been released, and your CISO has come down, you know, in a panic. How exposed are we to this malware or this 0 day? Well, you need to answer the question. We are patching. We are at 95% patching success. Okay, but you're not. You're only at 95% patching success of the devices that you can actually see.
Yeah.
And so no matter how good, how robust your solutions are, if you're not addressing that other part, which some people call shadow IT or ghost IT or rogue IT, if you're not addressing that piece, then it's like leaving your front door wide open. No matter how good the bars are on your window, your front door's open because these machines are sitting on your interior network.
Okay. And I'm sure there are people sat there now thinking, well, you know, my report says 95%. This is great. Why would I even go looking for other things that aren't there? Like, why would anybody decide that this is something they want to do?
It's a question of risk. Okay, and I don't necessarily mean risk in terms of compliance or regulation, which is obviously absolutely critical, but it's a question of risk. The analogy I like to use is your finance department. So your head of finance, how much margin of error will he accept in the company accounts? And the answer is
none.
None. So why should you accept any margin of error in your security posture? Because that's what we're talking about here.
Yep.
Because your security posture is, if you think of IT hygiene, are my machines up to date? Is the firmware up to date? Is in terms of software licensing, do I have more installs of SQL Server than I'm paying for? Okay. You need to understand everything that's in your environment, which includes the devices that you didn't know about, because I'm not just talking about the OT, IoT, webcams, printers on your network, which they pose a risk all by themselves. I'm talking about your own corporate assets, which have fallen out of visibility, because that means if they're falling out of visibility, you've got users storing data on them, which is business critical, which might fall under compliance, and yet you can't absolutely be sure that you are protecting those devices correctly.
Amazing. Okay, that's really interesting. Is it easier? Should we have a look at how we do it?
Absolutely, yeah.
That would be really great.
100%, yeah. So what we're going to do here, we're going to move to a very quick demonstration. And in this example, we're going to use a tool called Tanium. Now, Tanium is unique in many ways. One of their core unique selling points is the visibility that they can give you. And they combine that with real-time data. And their topics we'll cover on other sessions. What we want to focus on here is actually how the discovery happens. So here we've got the web console, and you can see currently I've got reporting in close on 1,800 machines. And of those 1,800 machines, it's broken down. These are machines which we can see. We've got visibility of, and there's managed, unmanaged, unmanageable, and lost. Now, the Tanium discovery is decentralized. It works in a radically different way to every other tool. And consequently, as you can see from these little logos here, the scan is running by default configuration every 30 minutes. So what that means is I've got a window of resolution of 30 minutes on my network. So every 30 minutes, we do a full network scan. And it could be passive through to active as well. Now, no other tool can get close to that level of speed. Now, managed devices, the devices we've got the agent on, so we're not concerned about them for this topic today. Unmanaged devices, they're devices which we've discovered on the network. They don't have a management agent on them, but we think, or the system has determined that they are supported, i.e. a management agent runs on the supported operating system. And we pull back all the data you would expect. I'm just scrolling down the list. I'm going to pick one of these at random here. And so what can we see? We've got the MAC address first and foremost. Now, if it's a recognizable MAC address, we will convert it to a manufacturer. VMware, Dell, Hardware, Lenovo, so on. We'll pull back the IP address and the host name. So we do a DNS query, and we've got the host name as well. So it's about building up a picture. We know the operating system that's running on it. Now, what's really useful here in terms of risk and vulnerability, well, what services are running on this device? I can see remote desktop. It's got a web server. Is it a patched web server? When did we first see this device? Well, we saw it 2 years ago, but most recently we saw it 15 minutes ago. It's that constant building up a picture. Next thing we want to do is react to them, so we can catalog them, label them. Labels are dynamic. We can apply these labels automatically. If a machine moves between Paris and Japan, the labels update accordingly. And unmanageable devices. Now, this is where a lot of the risk often sits. These are devices which you don't know about, but also you can't manage. Printers, network attached storage, Xboxes, Raspberry Pis, your Wi-Fi enabled fridge freezer. Okay, they're all sitting on a network, so which means you should know about them. Not knowing about them is that blind spot that you have, your Achilles heel, which you're going to hear me say a lot. And we just because we can't put an agent on them, we can still pull back all of the same data we talked about. There's the printer, there's the NAS box we looked at. And what I'm going to do, we'll just dig in, we'll pick one at random here, and same data applies. Open ports, we've not got an agent on this machine, but we know it's running NX OS and it's got an SSH daemon running on it. Well, we can then do a remote vulnerability scan of it automatically. Is that susceptible to known CVEs and so on? And all the same points apply, labeling, cataloging, when did we first or last see it? All of that information we collate because it's useful data to know. And how do we do the scans? Well, it can be very passive, ARP cache queries through various levels up to a distributed Nmap scan, but it's fully controllable. I know Nmap makes a lot of network admins quite nervous, but you are in full control on the schedule and how it happens. Now, when we look at that data over time, so we're trending it here, we can see how that's evolved because we're scanning every 30 minutes. It doesn't take me 3 days or a month to scan. We've got that data. Now, what about the lost interfaces? Well, lost interfaces are key because these are devices that we did see at one point. I'm just going to drill in and show you what that looks like. So we did see these devices and then they disappeared for some reason.
Okay.
Now, is that a machine that went offline, or is it a device, potentially a rogue device, which showed up and then it disappeared? Perhaps it's the work was done. Well, normal network scanning tools would miss that, but Tanium comes in because it's got that really great window resolution. You can pick up these ephemeral devices, okay, and actually understand them. And the data, I'm just scrolling down because we can start collating this story. So it's a story of visibility, and we'll come to these in later topics. But this is data we're building up over time, all starting from a network discovery. So you can see there, and I should call out the environment is intentionally unpatched. So I've got lots of good graphs to show you in the data, but we're building up what's my vulnerabilities, what's patching progress, things like that. But it all starts with, well, how big is my problem? I.e., how many devices do I actually have on the network? Not how many devices does SCCM tell me with a plus or minus error of margin of 15-20%. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you. That was really interesting. And I think the main thing I take away from that is just how easy the platform is to look around, the data, the fact that it's all customizable. I think that's some really interesting things in there.
Yeah, and we should probably dig into that in a separate session because it doesn't do it justice. What we want, and it was a point you made earlier, we wanted to focus on the problem and a solution. This is not a product demo.
Not a product.
Okay.
Absolutely. So as you probably saw, there were quite a lot of questions pinging through. So I just wanted to pick a few out that I think lead on quite well from that demonstration. So I think we did touch quickly on it earlier, but it's always good to reiterate. What is the percentage of devices that are normally found when you do something like this that you didn't know you had?
Yeah. So when we do run these exercises, and we offer them as assessments for customers as well, and when we run these exercises, one of the very first questions we'll ask is, how many devices do you think you have? And the customer will usually say, well, it ranges from value X to value Y. And that discrepancy, they sort of put it at around 10%. And then we dig into, well, why is that? And it's, well, I only have a 60% confidence in my CMDB. And procurement tell me 5,000, but that doesn't account for devices which have been amortized, or it doesn't account for lost devices. And then when we look at all the tooling, because each tool that we have, whether it's Qualys or Rapid7 or Tanium or ServiceNow, they all report a different answer back. Okay, and so there's always that level of uncertainty.
So that discrepancy is quite high, and obviously that's where it comes back to, like, this is your Achilles heels. If you think you've got this lovely report, and it might be that you are doing a great job, this isn't
100%.
A lot of this can be used for validation as well.
Mhm.
But that discrepancy is the downfall between you potentially being breached or something happening on the network.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it as high as 20-25%.
Wow.
Where you ask a customer, how many devices have you got? And it's at least 8,000.
Right.
But anything above that,
Could
we
be
don't
more.
know. Yes. And it seems like, I know we're making light of it here. Okay. What really strikes me on it is the apathy. It's like, well, there's a plus or minus factor of double-digit percentage, and people are fine with it. And my point earlier about the CFO, you should be applying that same rigor
Yes.
to your security posture, to your environment, as you would to your accounting books, because HMRC and Companies House are not going to accept our accounts are mostly right for this year. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think you just mentioned there that this integrates quite well with some other platforms, but obviously once this is done and you've got this lovely report, can people go ahead and integrate this into their SIEM tool? Or
100%, yes. So I sat in a meeting once, and someone once said to me, big data background, said data is worthless unless I can get some value out of it. So no matter how much data you're collecting, it has no value unless you can actually use it in the right way. And that's what we're talking about. This is a perfect example. So I mentioned earlier, a customer saying they have 60% faith in their CMDB. I mean, that seems like a ludicrous answer these days, because the technology's there. Well, if you've got your Tanium Discover running every 30 minutes, and that's the default configuration, you can have that every 15, every 10 minutes if you wanted to. And if it only takes 2 minutes to complete, well, if you start integrating that into your CMDB, using it in your SOAR, using it for asset information as well, well, you can convert all of those solutions into real-time data sources. So your CMDB becomes a real-time CMDB, which unlocks user targeting, user provisioning of data. Hannah's requested some new software. Well, the system knows exactly where Hannah's logged on at this moment in time, because that data is constantly being fed into it.
Okay. One last question I think is quite interesting here is, I have multiple networks. I am big in M&As, a lot of mergers and acquisitions within the company. I'm really, really set down. My current network is fantastic. How do I go about looking, does this tool work for this company that I'm bringing into my network? Does it work across the multiple networks?
100%. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So I've been guilty of this as well over the years. In the past, when you did network discoveries, a lot of it depended on Active Directory data and sites and services. And if you used SCCM, it would literally walk through your network space IP by IP. And the way you would typically do it, there are other solutions out there that do it, but most of them conform in the same way. You have central servers, you have scanning servers or beacon servers. And then what you do is you give it your IP range across all of your networks. These networks need to be joined together somehow. And then these solutions, they walk through your IP range, IP by IP, and it might take 10 seconds per IP. Now that's fine if you've only got 100 IP addresses to scan, but if you've got 1,000 or 10,000 or more, and each one takes 10 seconds to complete, well, it might take you a month or longer to scan your entire network. Okay, that's the first problem. The second problem, as I mentioned, you've got to have your networks joined together. Well, you can take all of that and forget about it with the solution that we're looking at here, because it's decentralized. There is no on-premise infrastructure whatsoever, and there's no penalty for not having that on-premise infrastructure. So the way it works is the Tanium service sits in the cloud. It's a cloud service, and it uses all of the managed agents as eyes and ears. So as long as you've got presence on each of those remote networks, even though those networks are there's no Active Directory trust or forest between them, there's no VPN, there's no trusted cabling somewhere between them, they can all still be discovered and managed in exactly the same way. So what it means is networks A, B, and C, there might all be 3 different entities within the same group, and then you might have a satellite group. You might even have an air-gap network. I mean, we can still run this in air-gap environments as well with certain limitations, but you can run all of these in a completely decentralized way, and so they all scan in parallel. You don't need to start connecting these networks together, and you don't need to compromise on how long it takes.
So this is a really fantastic thing to do for companies that go through a lot of acquisitions and mergers.
Especially so, and I've seen many use cases, many conversations start with that specific use
Yeah.
case.
Okay.
The customer's saying, we acquire many businesses,
Yeah.
and everyone has their own tooling.
Yeah.
Everyone uses their own tooling for discovery and patching, everything else. But what we need as the group company, we need an overview of a single pane of glass, a single console.
Yes.
And first and foremost, we need to know what we've got.
Yeah. What risks are we bringing in, if
Yeah.
any? I need to know that Joe Blogs has got his network set up.
And I'll close on one final story. Is one of the customers I worked with, they were breached. Okay. Well, they had a malware outbreak. And when they went back through the investigation using their EDR tool, it was discovered that they had on a Saturday there was air conditioning maintenance.
Okay.
So there was an engineer in the data center looking at the air conditioning for service, and he needed an instruction manual. And so he plugged his own laptop into one of the switches to get an internet connection, and malware broke out off of his laptop. A benign act with a huge outcome, which was a problem. And it only happened, and it took a long time to investigate. Now, in a world, if you could do a network discovery every 15 minutes, it takes 2 minutes to complete.
You'd see it there.
You'd see it right there, and you could start reacting to it through integrations and everything else.
So it's a whole potential cost saving, people process time saving, lots of other benefits to it as well.
It's the foundation, it's the baseline, it's the point from where you start when you're looking at your IT hygiene in your business.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thanks. Really interesting. Thank you for answering those questions. There are others coming through, but like I said, we have run out of time for that. So Dan and I will touch base and come back to you individually, but thank you for popping those in. I just want to highlight again, Dan mentioned it earlier, that we are offering a complimentary cyber risk assessment, which is fantastic, like you've seen, to get a clear picture of where your assets lie, look at the likelihood of sort of threats developing, and also it can also just validate where you are, that you are doing a good job, and potentially you can take that report to management and say, look, this is where we are, isn't this great? So it's not all about discovering nasties, is it? Some of it is about
could be validation alone, absolutely,
alone as well. I think we've run out of time, so we are planning to come back next month, and like I said, this is a mini series of webinars where we're going to be looking at about now that we've discovered these assets, you've got these endpoints, what do we do with them, and specifically looking about how we patch them. We do stuff around patching as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.